Why is pricing AI so much harder than SaaS? Because the rules have changed, and a lot of founders have not caught up yet. In this interview, I'm joined by Dan Bilkowski, founder and chief product officer of Product Tranquility, who's helped dozens of B2B SaaS startups rethink how they price their products. We dig into why traditional SaaS models fail with AI, the psychology behind value, and how to avoid pricing yourself into a corner. Let's get to it. Why is AI product pricing different from SaaS product pricing or any other pricing models we've really seen?
It's interesting because I think for a lot of software companies, they are now having to deal with business realities that every other industry has always had to deal with. For the longest time, the incremental cost of serving an additional customer has been net negligible, effectively zero for AWS storage, networking, compute. And so now companies, as they're building in AI-enabled capabilities into their platforms, are seeing significant variable cost in serving those capabilities, and that money's going out the door to foundation model providers, et cetera. I don't think it's a net new pricing problem. If I'm in an e-commerce store and my cost of the hammers that I'm selling on my website cost me $2 landed, I can't just sell them to you for $1.50 and expect to have a business for very long. So this is a pricing challenge that pretty much every other industry has had to keep an eye on. But I think for most software companies, they've been able to skate along for a very long time without needing to worry about this incremental cost. And so it's causing, I think, significant consternation for folks on the cost and margin side. I think the other thing, and maybe this is slightly different than what other industries have to deal with, is, this is almost certainly a general purpose technology, much like electricity or telephone and communication networks. And I think it would have been very difficult up front to understand everything in your house that would run on electricity, all the applications, and where people would get value out of having voltage running through a particular appliance if you were just net inventing electricity and running the infrastructure. And we're in a little bit of that moment of uncertainty. And so you have uncertainty and exploration on the value side, while you have very concrete variable costs happening on the margin side. And so it's put, I think, software companies in a interesting position where they're trying to figure out both sides at the same time.
What are some of those variable costs you were talking about?
So let's take, for the purposes of the audience, separate two different classes of companies just to make sure that we're not leaving people behind. I talk about like the AI foundation companies. So these would be OpenAI, Anthropic, Google with Gemini. These are companies that are very much like the electricity providers. They're selling intelligence as a service. Their pricing models look very much like other infrastructure as a service companies like your AWS Compute or Azure, et cetera. The rest of the world is consumers of those foundation models in order to adapt these AI capabilities. And so what's happening is, say, for example, you're selling a CRM or customer service platform, and you want to use one of these foundation models in order to summarize all of the history that your company has had with a particular account or on a particular ticket, so that your salesperson or customer service rep can get up to speed on what the customer's dealt with, maybe over multiple reps they've been dealing with over multiple years, multiple product cycles. And so the company is going to, your customer's going to click the button to say, hey, I want to summarize this history. And that's going to have a cost that is going to, an OpenAI for some amount of processing. And the way the AI foundation model companies do it, at least traditionally now through their APIs, have been on it like a per token basis. but it's not clear necessarily to summarize an article what that means in terms of tokens. So it's a little bit unknown until you run enough of those. And those costs scale with the capabilities of the models. The most powerful intelligent models, as we're recording this, would be like Gemini 2.5 Pro or OpenAI's O3 models or Claude 4. These are incredibly intelligent, but also the most expensive on a per token basis. Or you might use a cheaper, less capable model in potentially for, depending on the task you're asking it to do, may get equivalent or to the human eye, basically equivalent responses. And so as companies are rolling out these capabilities, there's an uncertainty of, okay, we're going to experiment. We're going to put this new capability in our platform. We're not really sure if it solves the problem or if it works. These systems have this other effect where they're probabilistic, not deterministic. And so you may have had this experience where one day you use ChatGPT and you're like, oh my God, this is the smartest thing ever. And then you ask it, I don't know, the old thing was, how many R's are there in strawberry? And it couldn't answer that. And you're like, look, any 5-year-old can tell you how many R's are in strawberry. And so you may have, day to day or case to case, a different performance. And so you can't just say, oh, deterministically, this is how much it's going to cost us. And so the companies are in this area of exploration right now where that's causing them to not maybe have the certainty that they may otherwise have in some of their costing models.
Yeah, I experienced this when I was using Lovable a long time ago, where they would get really good at getting me really close to what I want, but then I would need to spend like 20 prompts to fix something that it took one prompt to make because it hallucinated something. And I realized later on that it was because Lovable doesn't have chat threads like Cursor and these other applications do, so that if the context it gets destroyed by overusage, then you have to change and start again with another thread. Okay, so we've talked about variables, and it's important to understand pricing. And I've experienced different pricing but from different companies. Like Lovable had like a $20 a month, and then they were charging up to $100 a month and for like 500 prompts. But then you go to Cursor, and Cursor for $20 will give you 400 prompts or 500 prompts. It's like each of these applications are doing similar things, but their prices are wildly different from each other. Normally in an industry, the prices may be similar to one another, and yet between Bolt, Lovable, Cursor, these are just examples of a class of AI products. Why are the prices so wildly different?
One is a characteristic of a new market. So I think that what you're seeing a lot right now is heavy experimentation and iteration. You're also seeing a lot of copying. So, although you mentioned, right, it's like, hey, I've got probably a $20 per month per user Lovable subscription. I can go to ChatGPT and it's also $20 per month. And I can go to Anthropic, use Claude, and it's $20 per month. Or I could go to Bolt or any number of these. So we're seeing folks that are, as a first pass saying, well, okay, Cursor has this. And so Windsurf comes behind like, well, we're just going to kind of use what they have so that, it seems to be working well enough for them. But you also see folks who are saying, hey, there's an opportunity here to maybe rethink how we're providing value given our use case and taking some risk. I think where this is one of the most prominent examples that I've seen is with OpenAI. They were the first out the door with the ChatGPT. Pretty much most people now, when you talk about AI, just think you're talking about ChatGPT. And they came out the gate with a $20 per month seat license. About 6-9 months ago now, they introduced their pro tier at $200 a month. This set off a lot of waves, at least in my world, because it was a 20 to 200, that's a 10x increase. And folks kind of looked at OpenAI as, hey, what are these folks doing? Like who in their right mind is going to pay $200 per seat? I think one, I don't know that they did a huge amount of research. There was some gossip that Sam Altman just sort of pulled it out of thin air. Hey, we want to do $200 a month. I don't know if that's true. I don't have any inside information to it. But what did we see? We not only saw that there was a cohort of folks who were willing to pay $200 a month. We then saw the same thing I said before, which is a bunch of copycats. So Google and Anthropic both came out with their pro tiers in the same order. I think Anthropic's is like $100 a month. I think Gemini's is on the 200, 250 a month, but basically the same basic concept. And not only were there folks who were willing to buy that tier, but I probably spend way too much time on AI Twitter myself. There are folks who are paying across all those providers all the highest tiers. So not only are they paying OpenAI $200 a month, but they're paying Anthropic $100 a month. They're paying Google $250 a month, et cetera. Because these are folks who want access to the latest and greatest intelligence. And so what I think is particularly useful about that example is that, one, they were able to take a really close look at what they were seeing in their usage data. So going back to the costing concern from earlier in our conversation, hey, these are not normal distributions. In school, we got the bell curve, the Gaussian distribution drilled into our heads. But when you're talking a lot about, especially in the pricing world, about usage, willingness to pay, there are really long tail skewed distributions. And they were seeing folks who were using it 10x, 100x more than the average user. And so said, hey, like there's folks who are, we're negative margin on, but we think also that they would get a lot of value out of having the latest and greatest, and we should price to that. And I think that's I also like that as a lesson learned for folks, because what I often see for companies that I work with, just even outside of the AI space, say you have a product or an offer for the SMB or mid-market, and now you're thinking about the enterprise. And let's say, put us back in the CRM world. Well, we charge $10 a seat. We're introducing a higher tier. I don't know, maybe we could charge 20 or 25 a seat. But those companies are often anchored to what they have in market today. And very rarely are they willing to even consider, maybe someone would be out there who would pay $100 per seat. But that's very much what can happen when you start to look at usage and customer value by these different type of segments who get different value out of your product.
So what exactly are they offering in these higher tiers that people justify paying for?
Well, through total transparency, I have not been convinced to buy the higher tiers of these products. I'm happy paying. I pay all three of them the lower tiers, so I definitely have a higher AI bill maybe than the norm, but not quite to that level. They're getting access to the most powerful models, and I hesitate to even say the model names because they'll probably all be different next week. But the most powerful models, as well as unlimited usage of those capabilities. And so, all the companies, it started with Google, released capabilities like deep research, where it's kind of like you think of it like a really capable intern that you could say, hey, go off and do web research on a couple hundred websites to answer, I don't know. I did it the other day I was buying a workout weighted vest. And so, I could go spend, a couple hours on Amazon reading reviews or, shopping around and looking at fitness websites, et cetera, what I need to know.
Yeah.
And so you could just fire off one of these agents, but they're, incredibly expensive. They're searching hundreds of websites and summarizing data. And so those are capped for most users. But on these pro plans, you can use them on an unlimited basis. And that can be, if your business is relying on it, it may be a no-brainer because you're like, hey, I'm using this to write code. That code I'm able to sell for 10, 20x whatever I'm paying, OpenAI, and this is effectively, replacing a junior software developer for me. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I've hit upon these limits a few times on ChatGPT's free version because I had the paid version before and I didn't see a reason to keep using it, but I like it enough that I want to use it. I just don't want to pay. And I found that I could very easily upload 2 documents or 2 images and I've hit the limit. Like within 5 minutes, I can hit the limit for the day and I have to wait like 10 hours. So I had to say, screw it. And I go to Gemini. My friend had a offer for me to get 3 months of like AI Pro for free, but I already had Google One on the account, so now I can access like all of those things. So I'm just using the hell out of Gemini's 2.5 Pro for marketing and sales and pricing and LinkedIn strategy and all of these things. And I feel like it's doing a much better job than ChatGPT. And I'm even asking ChatGPT to do the same thing that I'm asking Gemini to do, and I'm asking them to check each other's work. And sometimes ChatGPT agrees with Gemini. It's like, oh yeah, actually that's really good. But what if we also did this? And then I'm like, oh, actually, like that's quite a good idea. So sometimes ChatGPT is adding in things that Gemini is suggesting. It says, yeah, we can also do this, and it'll make this better. So I agree with the idea of having multiple AIs to work with, but I feel like paying for Gemini is valuable, and I don't feel like paying for ChatGPT is valuable for me. And I do find that Cursor is valuable because it has access to Claude, and I'm using that for coding a bunch of different websites and different things that I'm working on. So I I wish their pricing was more transparent. Like, yes, you say, okay, $20 for this, but then when you hit those limits, you're like, well, like now I have to wait until the limit is up. This happened to me as well. On Cursor last month, I hit the limit of 500 like 10 days before the month was over. And so I had to wait to be able to use it because it wasn't this thing where I was able to like top it up. I had to just wait. So that's more like a SaaS model where you have this fixed fee. But like with SaaS, you don't typically hit a limit. You just pay to be able to use the thing, but you're not limited to what you can use once you've paid. So why you were saying before that there's a higher tier for people to have unlimited use. Why is it that AI models are priced this way where there's a capped version and an unlimited version rather than a here, use it as you see fit?
There's a whole wealth of different topics within what you just said. So I think there's a few things going on. So I think one is there's a really interesting set of dynamics competitively when you look at the companies involved and their fundamental business models and what they are ultimately trying to achieve and also trying to stay alive. So what do I mean by that? You have Google with, I'm not the first one to say this, probably the best business model ever invented, that just throws off incredible amounts of cash. They could lose money on their AI like basically indefinitely. They could run the clock out on everyone else if they really wanted to, keep pricing pressure on the market and run those other companies out of business because they can fund that type of innovation. And we've seen them do that with, things like, Waymo, which is finally becoming commercial, but has been in their labs for like 15 years and has, they probably poured untold billions into developing. Similarly, we probably see that going on right now with Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, who's poaching all the OpenAI employees with ungodly amounts of pay packages because he doesn't necessarily need to win, but he just needs to make sure those other guys don't. And so he's willing to put his thumb on the scale with the assets that he has available. I think the other dynamic that is happening right now is all of these companies are incredibly hardware constrained. There was a meme, I think it was OpenAI's like Twitter account. I think it was probably back when they launched the image generation. And we're like, sir, our GPUs are on fire. Yeah, and OpenAI, Sam Altman of OpenAI has talked about this publicly, where he said, "I spend probably 50% of my day going around and begging people for additional GPUs." And so I think that is a fundamental supply constraint that most software companies have never had to deal with, and we're probably we could sort of make an analogy to probably early days of the internet, late 90s, when all of us had dial-up connections or DSL, and we didn't have fiber and broadband. And eventually, the world laid enough cable, and now we have 4K streaming Netflix, and you could I don't know, I get offers from Google Fiber to my house, so I could run 5 HD downloads simultaneously. I'm like, I don't need that, but I guess that's cool. So I think we're in a little bit of a transition there on a capacity constraint. I think there is a risk also in what you're pointing out, which is there clarity about what you're selling a customer, that they understand what they're buying going in. And we've seen a little bit of this recently, where folks have the sense that they bought some sort of unlimited, but then hit some hard limit. And what that does is that makes very angry customers. And that's not a good thing. And so I think some of these companies, they haven't existed very long. A lot of these companies are founded by folks who are, the whole founding team is like, maybe the oldest person is 23 years old. You have all these other dynamics of a very competitive industry, super rocket ship growth, trying to, make sure they could stay in business, but then also, acquire more companies in a month than most companies ever acquire in their entire lifetimes, and keep the lights on. And, their ability to sort of communicate clearly in the shifting landscape is being put under pressure. One thing that, in terms of what I see sort of probably will likely happen, predicting the future. Predictions are always hard, especially about the future. Something like, say, a Cursor or a Lovable is a intermediary between you and these models. Likely what will happen is some sort of baseline platform fee, and then what looks like a added value cost per token on top of that, that's fluctuating. So you can think of it similar to how you may have had back before WhatsApp destroyed the telecom business. They used to charge you based upon the number of SMSs you would send over your monthly limit. So you didn't just stop being able to send texts, but say you happen to get a significant other that month and your texts went up a little bit more than average, all of a sudden you got a giant bill at the end of the month because you went over your plan limit. That will probably be the evolution that these companies will start adopting, such that they don't have hard cutoffs. I think probably what's getting in the way of that right now is, and I think you even saw this a little bit, right? When Windsurf, the deal's not closed, but Windsurf is in an agreement to be acquired by OpenAI. OpenAI and Anthropic are direct competitors. Anthropic is struggling to make sure all their customers can get access to these models. And so they deprioritized Windsurf of getting the capabilities. Again, I don't have any inside information, but if you're in this situation where you're trying to not like just, hey, we're basically running out of stock, our GPUs are on fire, we have to allocate appropriately. So you're seeing that happen even at the foundation companies levels. And so I think the application provider companies are sort of at the mercy of what's happening lower in the stack right now.
So what if you're building a traditional SaaS that's going to have AI features inside of it, especially like an assistant? How should they price for that?
So for any pricing exercise, I think it's really important to be clear up front about what your goals are, because depending upon what your goals are, you can end up in very different places and both of them be totally okay. So if we think about potentially two different axes, they take your consulting license away if you can't put anything in the 2x2 matrix. So if we're in the world of AI goals, maybe my y-axis is monetization, low priority monetization versus high priority monetization, and then the x-axis be something like adoption. So, am I more concerned about just trying to get adoption and usage? And we think about this a lot from a product management perspective. Hey, I put out a new feature. I need to make it a habit of usage, right? If I put it out there and nobody uses it, like, it doesn't matter that I put it out, right? And so we need to be able to think about, okay, these are net new capabilities. There's a lot of uncertainty about why someone would even use it. Just saying it's AI, I think at this point everyone's sort of been AI washed. I think everyone's probably tired of hearing even the term, and what it means as it applies to your particular feature. People are like, I don't get it. So you want to try to drive that adoption to build a habit. And maybe monetization is a lagging factor. Maybe there's, hey, we're in this period of investing in what people find valuable, and therefore we're not going to try to gate that. You might go the opposite direction. I think Satya Nadella at Microsoft made a very bold move, maybe not the best in retrospect, but when they came out with their Copilot for Office 365, I think for Office 365, which is Word and Docs and PowerPoint, etc., I think it's about $10 per user per month. For the Copilot, they said, well, look, like, actually, if you want the AI assistant for all those, it's actually an additional $25 per month. So we're actually going to ascribe more value, because before, you could write and edit a document, but now the AI can write it for you. Turns out that the capabilities weren't quite there, and so I think that the promise of the value was greater than what the realization was. But they made a very strong statement as a market leader saying, hey, we're going to set a high bar for the rest of the market. And I can't remember timing wise if, OpenAI I think ChatGPT has already launched. And so, right, I mean, you saw when ChatGPT came out $20 a month, like the rest of the market just kind of followed. Oh, I guess $20 per month for these copilots is about right. And so that was a strong leadership move from there, and to set that price. What I think is dangerous. So one thing I talk about a lot when you're thinking about monetizing capabilities is picking the right pricing metric. A pricing metric is the unit of value you charge a customer for. So if I'm buying a CRM, I'm usually paying per seat, because there's a very strong value linkage between quota carrying rep and the amount of revenue the company is generating. And therefore, if the CRM is meant to help increase sales efficiency and deals closed and pipeline, et cetera, then that's a very natural pricing metric where the larger companies that have larger revenue will buy more seats. Where people can go off the rails when they introduce AI capabilities is say, okay, well, let's use that summary example I used before and say, hey, I'm going to add an option in the CRM. So a salesperson can say, hey, summarize all the history with this account. And that's going to use whatever, X amount of tokens on the back end. So now I'm also going to charge, besides per seat, I'm charging you $10 per seat, but now I'm also going to charge you per token. This is a no-no. I call this showing your customers your underpants. You don't want to show your customers your underpants. The underlying cost model is your problem, not your customer's problem. So what went from a very easy conversation to that CRO or VP of sales, hey, how many sales folks you got? I got 100. Great. It's $10 a seat. That's $1,000 a month for your company. Went from that to how many salespeople do you have? How many tokens are you going to use per month? And now this CRO VP of sales is going to be like, I don't know. How many tokens do I need? Like, what does that even mean? And so even if you have, there are sales folks out there who are incredibly talented and could probably navigate the conversation, But even if they do, when that prospect hangs up, they're just gonna be like, I thought I understood it and I don't, and now I have a busy day and I'm just not I'm just not going to think about that anymore because that seems way too complex. Let alone all the operational complexities of rolling that out to your entire sales team of differing capabilities and talent levels. And what you basically done then is just pour sand in your go-to-market engine, where now you have to train all of your salespeople to be AI experts. And so, what is the antidote to that? One is, if you believe that that capability is actually driving underlying value and you're putting it into a tier, can you rationally increase the price on your existing pricing metric? So if I was at $10 a seat, can this now be equivalent to a $12 per seat? This is actually the move that Google just did with Workspace. They decided they weren't going to compete head to head with OpenAI and Anthropic, trying to sell everyone Gemini subscriptions. So on the consumer side, they rolled it into Google One, but on the Workspace side, they said, "Hey, we're now rolling all the capabilities of Gemini into Workspace, and we're raising the price of the Workspace per user," which is an example of doing that. The other is by putting those more advanced capabilities into your higher tier offers. So if you've got a standard good, better, best offer, perhaps you start by putting the AI capabilities in your best, therefore creating an incentive for customers to upgrade, or so increase your share of wallet with them by them adopting your most expensive plan. So that's another way to drive it. There are others, but I'll stop there and see where you want to go.
What's the most important thing you've learned from focusing on pricing?
So pricing is this really interesting blend of economics and statistics and psychology. And I think that's what makes it super interesting. I think that last bit, for the most part, gets left out of all of the Econ 101, 102 lectures that everyone's ever sat through, where they teach you about supply and demand curves. There's no semblance of psychology in there. But especially when it comes to something like SaaS pricing, the more what a demand curve will show you is price relationships to volume. But the more fundamental problem for the areas that I work in software, it's price's relationship to value. And value does not exist in the bits in the product that you're selling. Value, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. Value exists in the minds of the customer. And so I think that has been a continuous touchstone for me of like, okay, I don't really care about what product you're selling. Like if we're talking about pricing, like I care about what your customer is thinking that product can do for them, because that's really where value lies. And therefore that's where we need to focus our attention on pricing.